Good day and good afternoon, and welcome to the launch of the What If Everyone Was an Entrepreneur paper. My name is Dr. Rachel Rees-Jones, and I'm here today in the amazing Moneypenny's head office. Here we're joined by Rachel Clatcher, CBE, who is the co-founder of Moneypenny and is also the founder of We Mind the Gap. I'm also joined by Gareth Jones, who is the founder, and the Chief Executive Officer of TownSq. Now, in a few minutes' time, I'll present the summary of the paper and I will submit a range of questions to our panel. But before I do, I'm delighted to tell you that our introduction today comes from Vaughan Gethin, Minister for Economy.
I welcome today's deep dive event into the concept of entrepreneurship and to consider the role that individuals and organisations can play to help further ignite entrepreneurial thinking. We have a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Wales, but what if we scaled up and could do even more? We have a national imperative to create and nurture more innovative, homegrown and profitable companies. Only by working together can we tackle the profound societal, economic and environmental challenges that we face. But the concept of an entrepreneurship mindset goes beyond starting or running a business. What potential could we unlock if we encourage more intrapreneurship within our corporate and public sector organisations? Reflecting on my time as Health Minister during the height of the COVID pandemic, I saw the interdependence of entrepreneurship and innovation, and its critical role in addressing the significant challenges that we faced, such as the need for new treatments and devices, the development of PPE, and infection prevention and control. Solutions often came from NHS Wales and social care staff themselves and helped lead to the adoption of new practices and transformative ways of working. We can explore the part that we all can play, the government working together with academics, our entrepreneurs and corporate organisations and our risk capital stakeholders to encourage innovation-driven entrepreneurship. Our new programme for government sets out ambitious commitments over the next 5 years to help tackle the challenges we face and improve the lives of people across Wales. And this starts with our youngest in the country through our world-leading curriculum reform to embed the notion of being creative enterprise contributors. I've outlined my commitment and the government's commitment to the Young Person's Guarantee. Entrepreneurial thinking will be vital in this economic climate, whether progressing to an apprenticeship, training, or of course, self-employment. We know our business community have faced tremendous challenges this last year and more. We want to use the levers we already have through Business Wales to help emerging entrepreneurs and businesses to build resilience and to innovate to unlock their huge potential. This is a fantastic opportunity to apply collective impact. I hope that this event will help to stimulate fresh ideas, genuine collaboration, and a focus on the practical ways in which we can all work together to develop new opportunities.
So we've just seen Vaughan Gethin describe how important entrepreneurship is to the Welsh economy and how we all have a role in shaping its future. The What If Everyone Was an Entrepreneur paper asks the fundamental question, can anyone be an entrepreneur? And examines the implications for business, society and the economy. It presents a positive case for change against a backdrop of one of the worst economic and social health disasters in modern history and asks how this could be achieved. The paper starts off by examining the definitions of what is an entrepreneur, and it identifies an evolving concept of entrepreneurship. It challenges stereotypical views of what is traditionally associated with being an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur being running and growing a business whilst maybe doing the occasional rocket or balloon flight, and replaces this with a very grounded and real world view of individuals in all walks of our society, in all sectors, that are adding value, financial, social and cultural value through the process of applying an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set. So what is meant by an entrepreneurial mindset or skill set? Well, the paper identifies a range of behaviours, actions, attitudes and beliefs. For example, entrepreneurs care about what they do. They have a genuine belief and desire to make a positive change. So whether that's starting or growing a business, whether that's contributing to existing commercial organisations, entrepreneurship, or whether it's actually helping society, socialpreneurship, they want to make a positive change. They actively look for opportunities and have an action, positive responsibility to take action. They continuously strive to learn and improve. It's quite interesting how entrepreneurs perceive failure. They perceive it positively, and like many of us who berate themselves when we make a mistake, entrepreneurs use it constructively as a way to improve and develop and grow. They embrace uncertainty and ambiguity and risk, and they adapt to the changing conditions. They are resilient, they persevere, and they motivate themselves and others despite challenging circumstances. Now, when we look at the evolving definition of what it is to be entrepreneurial, you don't necessarily have to be running a business to be considered entrepreneurial. There are many people in our society and individuals in all walks of life that are demonstrating these competencies, but don't necessarily consider themselves to be an entrepreneur. Now, the paper presents entrepreneurship as a very force for good in the world, and it justifies this position by presenting a large number of research papers and studies, both academic and non-academic, from right across the world. So, for example, if we look at a recent study of the Kaufman Foundation, that found entrepreneurs, both individuals and in organisations, right across the world came up with fantastic ideas and innovative solutions, developing protective clothing, masks, ventilators and a lot of other things, which their ability to adapt under challenging conditions are actually saving lives. Another example is a recent review of 200 articles which featured in the Journal of Business Venturing, and that found that entrepreneurship was actually alleviating extreme poverty, particularly in developing countries, but also in developed countries like ours. It was addressing social inequality and it was helping social mobility. The paper concludes by suggesting and recognising that if we can agree that entrepreneurship is a force for good in the world, that by encouraging and embracing these entrepreneurial skills and competencies, we can not just rebuild our economy, but we can develop a society where people are empowered to make a positive contribution. The paper then continues with asking stakeholders to engage in understanding and involving in this debate. It offers people practical steps to make a positive change and asks them to get involved in the discussion. So I'm now going to ask and involve Gareth Jones to join me and Rachel Clacker to join me, and we'll start the discussion. So Rachel, if I may come to you first. Moneypenny is an outsourced provider, now employing nearly 1,000 people, I believe, predominantly in Wales, but also across in the US and across the globe. So as someone who falls into the traditional definition of what it is to be an entrepreneur, can you tell me what your interpretation of entrepreneurship is?
Well, I believe it's a mindset. So it's actually, let's find a problem and then let's be the solution. And being means having the passion to find the solution, having the agency to actually find the solution, and the bravery, I think. So it's about making good stuff happen, and I don't believe that entrepreneurs walk around with a big badge on them saying I'm an entrepreneur, because I think most of the time they're just far too busy making that good stuff happen and knowing that the worst thing that can happen is that they can fail.
Fantastic. Gareth, can I ask you, what does entrepreneurship mean to you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one of those interesting things that most entrepreneurs that you meet who are entrepreneurs don't call themselves entrepreneurs, right? It's a title that's given, but I think this idea of being entrepreneurial is the opportunity for us to embrace. It's this idea of the skill set, the mindset, and how you approach a challenge with a positive expectation as opposed to a fear of failure or what might happen, which I think is a really important distinction.
Excellent. So we can move on to the second question. So the second question comes from Klinos Neil, Community Manager at Welsh Ice. And Klinos asks, what barriers do you think people are going to face trying to implement this change? So if I can come to you, Gareth, first.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be around, I think firstly it's going to seem quite provocative as a question, this idea of what if everyone was an entrepreneur, because I think, you know, that wouldn't necessarily create a great balanced society.
Yeah.
But I think it's starting to think about maybe aspects around how you make decisions or how you train and support your teams, how you embrace this idea. I think it's really important. I think it's trying to move it away from it being starting a business as being you're an entrepreneur when you start a business. I think moving back to what are the steps before even that milestone make you an entrepreneur, I think is really interesting. I think also what we're seeing a lot of now is people wanting to feel their purposes and their values are aligned with what they spend their days doing.
Yeah.
And so I think entrepreneurship has a big role to play in that as well.
Definitely. Rachel, would you add anything to that?
Well, obviously I concur with everything that Gareth said, but I think that the a major issue of entrepreneurship or that mindset can be the leadership of organisations who expect. I think it's a really outdated notion that any leadership knows exactly what to do in any in any given situation. As we know, that our world has changed beyond recognition in the last 18 months. And nobody can say that they know the answers. So actually, our leaders now more than ever need to actually say to the people within their organisations, I don't know the answer, but actually we can start a conversation here and we can create an environment within which you can go and help find the solutions. And we've seen so many examples of that over, people having to operate in different ways. But I think it's not good enough now for things to be done because that's the way that they've always been done. I think we need to challenge that. But that requires a leadership and within organisations, big or small, to be really brave and to foster an environment within which that those entrepreneurial characteristics of bravery and finding problems and thinking that you might have a bit of a solution and create environments where people can go and exercise that, make most of that opportunity.
So is it difficult
I haven't said that very clearly.
Is it difficult to empower people to actually be allowed to make decisions and to go and make change?
I think it's really difficult because I think often in organisations people might join with more of an entrepreneurial mindset, should we say, but sometimes structure and process can actually result in that being lost. Sometimes people need to be reminded that they actually can be masters of their own destiny, and they can spot an opportunity and have the wherewithal to go and to go and make that opportunity into an opportunity for their organisation. I think questions need to be asked throughout our organisations to identify those individuals who do have a sense of what opportunities might be there.
I mean, the counter to that, when people come in and you try to encourage them to have an entrepreneurial mindset, do they feel surprised or uncomfortable? How do they tend to react when you give them that extra layer of freedom or support?
Well, I think if people feel empowered and engaged, then they are making a difference, then they're engaged, then that just fosters more success, doesn't it? But also people need to feel that they can fail as well. And if we say everything in this organisation is set up only so that we can succeed and there's no room for failure, then actually that stifles any kind of innovation or change. And I think we need to that the characteristics of that in this report about an entrepreneurial mindset that you were just talking about before, Rachel, people who are caring, are resilient, they're looking for opportunities, they embrace uncertainty. Actually, those are characteristics we want in every single member of our teams, aren't they? We need those today more than ever. So actually, if we're employing people with those characteristics, we've just got to create an environment within which those people can demonstrate those characteristics. And that can be quite tricky,
Mm.
because actually you've got a load of people all over the place trying to make good stuff happen. There is a management issue there, but it's creating a cultural environment within which people can, if they see problems, can go and find a solution. And there isn't a computer says no mentality, or that's the way we've always done it, so that's the way we're always going to carry on doing it.
That's really good. Okay, thank you. So another question, how do you feel entrepreneurship might work in parts of Wales that have never fully recovered from the loss of big industry? That's a very interesting question. Can I come to you, Gareth?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think there's kind of a couple of steps in this. I think it's opportunity identification, and I think it's this idea. I think sometimes that good things can happen in communities. I think when Moneypenny was growing in Wrexham, it was this real sense of excitement that something like this is happening in a community and is committed to a community. So I think it's giving a space for those projects to develop and entrepreneurs within the community to start the first steps towards, Moneypenny wasn't always a 1,000 person organisation, it was once a 2-person organisation, right? And it's getting from that point to 1,000 isn't straightforward and easy, but it's part of the process. And I think so much of what we're seeing now in the last 15, 20 years has been around tech revolutionising industries. I think increasingly we're seeing green is going to revolutionise industries, and that will create opportunities. And I think, again, as is everything in the paper, it's moving from a perspective of green is going to be a threat to green is going to be an opportunity. And how responsible business can create new business models that, especially I think, can thrive in areas where big industry has been pulled out. And I think that there are challenges. I think with the other side of this is if it's recent or if we're talking generational damage, because we've had multi-generations for some of this to have been changed or reversed.
So do you think a lot of this is about the perspective of the individual and the stakeholders viewing this as an opportunity to change and develop and move in forward, as opposed to holding on to traditional views of this is what I had and I had a job for life? It's a case of, well, this is actually a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, from our perspective at TownSq, I love when someone comes and says, well, I'm leaving because I'm doing that, and it's become a part of the stepping stone. It's that idea, I think, that if you've seen an environment where people around you aren't doing jobs they love and work is just work, then that's your expectation of what work is. So when you're in an environment that creates that freedom, there's almost a bit of a learning about, is this what they say in the induction and then it's not the truth, through to actually, this is genuine and real. So I think for a lot of people, work for life is not the case, but you need to have, a different fire in your belly to know that that's in your control. It's not, that's a positive as opposed to a negative, and that's not a positive for everyone, because some people work is work and that's the way it is. But I find it a really kind of curious thing around how you help people to realise the positives in a situation as opposed to only seeing the downside.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on, we've got a question from Catherine Paluna from the University of Wales, Trinity St David's, and Catherine asks,
Hi, I'm Kath Penaluna, the Director of the International Institute for Creative Entrepreneur Development, based at the University of Wales, Trinity St David. Thank you for the insights within your report, and I would welcome your thoughts based. Hi, I'm Kath Penaluna, St David. Thank you for the insights within your report, and I would welcome your thoughts based on your findings of how they can support quality of learning in higher education, especially when we look across the disciplines where words like entrepreneurship just aren't used.
So we have a question from Catherine Paluna of the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and Catherine asks, how can the findings support quality of learning in higher education, especially when we look at areas where words like entrepreneurship just aren't used? Now, maybe this is a question that sits in kind of my domain as I work for the University of South Wales as the Entrepreneurship Development Manager. I think the report has profound implications, and it aligns quite nicely actually with the QAA guidance as well as the HE guidance. There's certainly an emergence going on whereby it is clear that through the report and through HE and QAA that entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurship is applicable to everyone across all our walks of societies of different sectors, and therefore it is applicable to a range of different disciplines. And what this is really saying is those different students, whether they be chemistry students, whether they be in civil engineering, whether they be computer science, they need entrepreneurial and enterprise skills, and they need to be given access to those skills. And by doing so, we'll not just enhance employability, and address the skills gap, which is a very big issue at the moment, but also will develop a population that is more adaptable, more happy, more confident, and more willing to add value at a multiple level. How do you feel?
Well, yeah, I agree, and I think, you know, we mustn't get caught up in the words around entrepreneurship, you know, because they it's not the word entrepreneurship that's important, it's actually the characteristics of entrepreneurship that are important, and of course they're relevant across all subjects. But I do think there's, you know, I think there's a challenge in higher education, or in any education, is that the young people that are being taught at the moment, their experience of the world is very different to the people who are teaching them, you know, and so there is a challenge for our educators to educate in ways that are relevant to our audience. Absolutely. You know, and so our young people, no matter whether at university or school, have been sitting in their bedrooms for the last 18 months. And actually through that there is a whole wealth of learnings that can be taken. You know, some are really positive things that will inform and allow much more freedom around access to education and opportunity. So I think there's a real opportunity for higher education to be entrepreneurial itself. Absolutely. And teach in ways, you know, and garner all the lessons and learnings of the last 18 months so that we can create better, more relevant, more accessible education for all.
I couldn't agree more.
We were comparing good books to read before the session, and there's a great book by Stephen Johnson called Where Good Ideas Come From, and he talks about this idea of the adjacent possible. And I think, the skill set of being curious about colliding ideas in different ways that you might not otherwise consider, I think is vital in whatever industry. So the next big innovation from civil engineering is just as likely to come from biomimicry as it is to come from a civil engineer who's been a civil engineer for the last, 50 years of their life teaching civil engineering to someone, without picking on civil engineers. And there was another great book, Range by Daniel Epstein, which talks about this idea, that, great innovation comes from that space. So I think that's where I think universities have the potential, because you have this real melting pot of ideas, of perspectives, of inspiration, and it's how you move it away from faculties and schools to being that intersection and the crossover. And I think that's why, as a cross-cutting theme, I know that's used too much, which doesn't really play out, but as a theme which should connect faculties, you'd think it would create amazing opportunities for people to see, right, if we connect this idea with this idea, something amazing might happen.
Fantastic. So we need to move away from maybe silo mentality of singular disciplines to a range of different interactive modules, in effect.
Yeah, all the big ideas come from something which at the start we think that wouldn't work, and then it's tested and it didn't work, but that part did work, and then you build on that, and as opposed to just thinking that won't work and don't try it, right?
Iterative process, absolutely. Thank you for that. We'll move on. Okay, another question. During the COVID crisis, entrepreneurial thinking saw businesses retool and change focus to start making needed items such as PE and ventilators. We talked about this in the presentation. Many NHS staff were crucial to finding innovative ways to address new challenges. How do we continue to foster this innovation in sectors such as the NHS? What a fantastic question. Can I come to you, Rachel, first? Would that be okay?
I think it comes down to leadership, and to leadership accepting that they don't know the answers all the time, and that we need to speak to the people who are on the front line of our businesses every day to understand the challenges and the opportunities that they are facing every day, and what solutions they might be able to bring to the table. And I think that's quite hard. It's really hard in massive organisations like the NHS, but certain sectors of the NHS have absolutely shown that they can do it, and God, if they can, and let's encourage that more and use those. Let's celebrate those examples. And I think what's really hard, it comes back to this idea of failure. There's Matthew Side written a book called Black Box Thinking, where he talks about how the airline industry is the safest industry in the world because every time there is a mistake, it's recorded in a black box, and then the worldwide industry shares and learns from that mistake. It's really hard to do that within the NHS.
Absolutely.
But actually, we need to create environments within which it is safe to talk about the failures, so that we can then share the lessons of those to make sure that we don't fail again. And I don't know very much about the NHS. I know lots about Moneypenny, but I know that it can be easy to fail at something and not share those lessons, and then to continue failing. Whereas actually somebody over there might actually know the answer. So I think it's about creating that open environment, and that can involve. That's a big ask.
It is. Cultural change usually takes a long time, doesn't it? Gareth?
Yeah, I think it's the same with any big organisation where it's hard to get voices from one side who are seeing something to be heard in other ways. And I think we see this in teaching. There are a lot of amazing perspectives. And again, that space for innovation was created in the last 18 months or so. I think it's a hard challenge, but space is something which, making space is used quite a lot. But this idea of allocating time in someone's diary for them to do that activity, if you're in a profession like, if you're working in the NHS, or if you're a teacher, or any of these big services, there just isn't the time. And even though the willing might be there to create an environment, you have to be quite, and we see this in our company, we say, do more of this or do more of that. But unless you say to them, you can take a Friday off to go and work on that thing, it just never happens, because there's always something more important than the nice fluffy stuff. But it's the nice fluffy stuff that leaps you forward, So I think there's lots of interesting trends about like the startup rates around holidays. So after August, people will come back and think, do you know what?
Yeah.
I've had enough.
Do you think there's an element of when people are put in a corner? I know you're very hot on this, and we've had discussions about it before, that naturally it forces you to change. It requires a positive change to come out. And naturally what COVID did is create a situation where, for example, teachers and the NHS staff, which you were just talking about, were forced into a position where they had to adapt. They had to be empowered to do things that naturally they wouldn't be allowed to do in other circumstances. What would be interesting to see is whether we go back now or whether we can step forward, I guess, which is what the question's asking.
I think it's both sides, right? It's the carrot and the stick. With something like the COVID crisis, there was a goal everyone was focused on, and it's very rare even in any business or in any organization, you would have a single goal that everyone is so focused on, and there's plenty of theories around North Star and all this stuff, but it's very rare that everyone completely appreciates and gets it. I think that's what we've seen in the last 18 months. Yeah. But you also had this quite significant stick of, what happens if we don't focus on this challenge. So I think it's getting that balance where people feel motivated and aligned, and have a clear sense of what that challenge is, because articulating where you're headed is quite hard as well. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, interesting question. Let's move on. We have a question from Katie Hughes, who's a community assistant at Wrexham Enterprise Hub. How can entrepreneurship help SMEs to become more socially conscious? Can I come to you, Gareth?
Yeah, sure. I think right now we're living in a time where a lot of social awareness is kind of rising to the surface in quite aggressive ways, and we're seeing plenty of things that like Apple have had a dossier released about all sorts of things this week, and plenty of other big companies. I think again it's that willingness to embrace and recognize how you can do things in a different way in the future, and that's not to excuse bad behavior that's happened in the past, but I think a lot of social awareness issues are very hard to empathize with if you've not lived that experience yourself. It's a lot easier for you to understand what a single parent's going through if you are a single parent. I was involved in a program talking about they call them life shocks, and it's this idea that when your life is turned upside down by an event or something, and how you react. And they were saying, well, if only people had more in savings, but unless you've been in an environment where you cannot, you're literally taking coppers into the supermarket to buy a bag of flour because that's all you've got, and you've been finding those, it's hard to empathize. So I think it's this idea when we're talking about social awareness, unless you've been racially abused, or unless you've been attacked because of your gender or because of your sexuality, it's very hard to deeply empathize, I think, with that social issue. And that's why I think the breadth of an organization which has those viewpoints can feed that back in, but the organization needs to, the leaders of the organization needs to want to hear that, and again, hear where they've made mistakes or where they've been wrong, rather than fingers in the ears, ignoring what's happening. The problem exacerbates and things get worse and worse. But it's such again, it's a very risky environment,
Yeah.
because people don't want to misstep. But it, again, listening, creating the space, creates the opportunity, I think.
Rachel, would you add anything to that?
Well, it's a kind of it's an interesting question because I think businesses generally need to be more socially conscious. Well, not most importantly, very importantly, because we're all part of a community, but also we all want people to come and work in our businesses, and increasingly young people who join business want to work with businesses that share their values, and I do think there is a greater social conscience now, and so as organisations we need to be part of that social consciousness, and we need to attract young people who we need to our purpose and our values needs to resonate with the young people who are coming to work with us, and so I just think that social consciousness is on the rise, and that we need to be embracing any kind of entrepreneurial activity that allows us to be more a part of our communities, that allows us to play a stronger part in the social fabric of where we are.
It's funny, I was listening to an audio book coming up on the train, which was discussing entrepreneurship, and it was talking about Bill Gates and how that reciprocation that goes on, there's a vested interest in becoming socially conscious, not just in terms of getting close, what you were just saying, to the community and certain members of our society, but that two-way action of there's a benefit out there for private sector businesses and public sector businesses to be socially conscious, and there's a continuous cycle that will be a virtuous cycle of improvement.
Yeah, I mean, setting up, we set up We Mind the Gap 5 years ago, and it's about we're a social mobility charity, but actually our Moneypenny clients love the fact that Moneypenny has set up We Mind the Gap. Does that make sense? Even though the charity is separate from Moneypenny now because we're growing, and but Moneypenny obviously supports the charity in enormous ways. But it just shows you that so we were entrepreneurial in setting up. I suppose we were entrepreneurial in setting up We Mind the Gap, but it's never thought about it in that sense before. But we saw a problem, which is I don't think there are enough quality opportunities for young people who maybe haven't had the opportunities that the rest of us might take for granted. And so we decided to create opportunity where there was none, but that has in its turn created opportunity for Moneypenny, and we attract different people now. It's interesting, and I think it's really important that we understand the importance of our social consciousness in the way we run our businesses.
I love that, thank you.
I think so when we became a B Corp, now when we're hiring, people cite it a lot more often when they're going through the interview process, because it instantly means they're attracted because they know that we must have, we've been measured against this stuff. It's something that they align to. The other thing that picking up on that we started doing was spending more of our marketing budget on workshops, events, and things that support the community, because that fosters word of mouth, and the more the word of mouth is good, so the We Mind the Gap creates a solution to a recruitment problem as well, right? So it's very much a commercial thing, but it's focused on a social good. It's not, I don't think it's this idea that it has to be one or the other and they're in two distinct camps. If the social good can create commercial benefit, it means you could do more social good. This idea that the cycle just continues to grow and grow and grow, and it's absolutely. I think that's where there's plenty of innovation for companies thinking, this is a problem we have, we can't help, we can't recruit, or we can't reach this audience, or great, how can we create something which does good, which everyone buys into, whether it's new customers coming in, whether it's new members of the team, and then in turn, we've got this feeling of helping people as well.
I think what you've said there is really important, because there aren't distinct camps between making money and being socially conscious. There are shades of grey, and there are a lot of companies who are making money and being profitable, but they're doing an awful lot of good in the process as well. And I think we need to shout about those firms and allow them to be proud about what they are doing.
And Rachel's example is great. Like, We Mind the Gap was not created to be a big charity, it was created to solve a problem. And then when you've tested it, when you've done the innovation part and you've seen there's demand and it's working, you make changes, and then it becomes something which has, then it becomes uncontrollable, right? Then it just grows
it's
and
growing
grows
and
and
growing.
grows.
And we're now involving more and more businesses. So, other businesses wants to do something that's socially good,
Yeah.
and we can facilitate that for them, because they can offer placements to our young people. They can, they come and talk to, they provide role models and mentors, whatever. So actually, we're creating this web of businesses, all of whom want to make a difference on their own doorstep. But in so doing, it's a real strong statement of intent to the people that we want to work for us in the charity, and also, for us as a business.
I think, maybe we could talk about this all day, but I think the other important thing you mentioned there is around this invitation. I think when I was talking about space earlier, to be invited. So if someone says, "Will you be a role model?" They might have wanted to. Everyone wants to this idea of volunteering on a Saturday morning, but there's always this thing about time, treasure, and talent. So we could all go and paint a wall, but I'm not very good at painting walls, so I'd take 3 times longer than someone who's got the skills. But you could be a mentor or a role model to someone, which would add significant value in a meaningful way. But unless you extend the invitation, it's hard for them to know. You wouldn't go up to someone in the supermarket and say, "Can I mentor you? Would you mind?" It doesn't work. But if there's someone who's saying, "I would like to invite you," and they get the CPD benefit, they get everything on their CV, all that good. So it's not, again, it's all reciprocal.
Yeah.
That's where the magic is, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's move on. Okay. So another question that's come in is, how can adopting an entrepreneurial mindset help us to revitalize our high streets? Oh, I love this. This is quite topical. Who wants to go first? Rachel, can I introduce you?
Oh my God! Well, how can it? Well, hopefully, any kind of mindset can help us revitalize. Some kind of mindset can help us revitalize, because we need to, don't we? But I think when I go to London, I always go to Barnes, which is a really nice little bit of London. And the reason I go, it's got really nice cafes, but it's also got some really nice charity shops, and they're all those lovely curated. The Mary Porter started doing, didn't she?
Yeah.
Really nice. They're sort of charity shops where they curate their stuff, and you can go and find some really nice stuff, whatever. But I just think that, so that's why I go to that bit of London, and I think there's an opportunity there that I think we're all looking for experiences and something we can't find currently, or can't find somewhere else. So I just wonder, I don't know, oh my God, it's a massive question, isn't it? But somebody needs to be really entrepreneurial and come up with something. But I do think it's around community and experience. And to find out exactly what it is, we do need to be entrepreneurial, because we need to, it is a big issue that we have for our communities. And
I think in the news recently there was an example of someone taking a big department store and turning it into like a go-karting centre. And what you were saying about being more entertainment and family focused and eating out and all that kind of thing, being an attractive place to be. There's a lot to be said for that development that needs to happen, and someone needs to take that wider view of what that could be. Gareth, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, again, it comes down to invitations. I think I think a lot of people don't feel they could go and take a retail unit on the high street, because most of the agents are based outside of the area, or they're owned by pension funds. And so I think there's this gap around how people in the community who want to do something, if someone wanted to create that kind of environment, having that step to go into that place. I think more test trading opportunities, we as people need to go out and spend on the high street more, and that's fine, but it needs to keep up. And I think what's really frustrating is when you go into a retail experience and it's just not, the service isn't as good as you would get in other ways, or the customer service, or the general experience. So I think you need to reward what's happening now.
Isn't it?
It is.
But there's an amazing place that's opened up in Wrexham called Yellow and Blue, which is a community hub, and it's just fantastic. It's on the high street, and you just think, that's working. There must be other things that can come, and we just need to try. And I think it just comes back to that whole thing of, let's just give it a go. And but that requires the pension funds, the councils, whatever, to facilitate those things. And that's going to be tricky.
So it's an experimentation on different things.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So we have another question from Martin Downs, who's the social. Sorry. So we have another question.
My name's Martin Downs. I'm the Social Entrepreneurship Officer at Wales Cooperative Centre. Thank you for the paper. There are definite undertones in there of a triple bottom line approach to entrepreneurship, and without naming it directly as such, of a social entrepreneurial approach. My question is, given that we're moving to a well-being and greener economy, do you not think that our understanding of entrepreneurship has to radically be reframed around the social entrepreneurship model? Or is it the case that actually entrepreneurship is wedded to a high growth capitalist model and vision of the economy, one that we simply can't afford to have anymore for the damage that it's doing? And if we do need to reframe it, what does that mean in terms of our wider stakeholder groups and emphases and the stories that we need to tell?
So we have another question from Martin Downs, who's the Social Entrepreneurship Officer at Wales Cooperative Centre. As we move into a well-being and green economy, do you think our understanding of entrepreneurship will be reframed around the social entrepreneurship model? Okay. Gareth, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about, right? Is this idea that your only goal is no longer just how much money can we make out of this, but how much good can we do at the same time? So people who are motivated to create a commercial business around a social mission or a social cause, I think that's happening increasingly. And it's not just new entrepreneurs, but it's companies that have been going, for a long time, realizing they have a wider role in society. I think there's a mixture, I guess, between people who do it as a marketing stunt and people who do it authentically, which sometimes is quite hard to read through. But yeah, I mean, you only have to kind of walk down the aisles of a supermarket and see how many more vegetarian and vegan products there are on sale now. And, people who are trying to make it easy for people to live in a more socially conscious way, which are creating commercial businesses off the back of it. So I think it is becoming the normal way.
From an interesting thing that came out of the report was the separation between the evolving definition of what it is to be entrepreneurial, and that is clearly evolved, but there seems to be a perceptual issue with still identifying as an entrepreneur. It's still associated with people running businesses, and I think that needs to evolve, that needs to change, if we're going to move away from not just about making money, but that social entrepreneurship, that green entrepreneurship, that even entrepreneurship, it needs a perceptual change in the minds of people to say this has a wider point of view. I think Martin is hitting on something which is really important, and it's going to take something that you said, Rachel, some cultural change. It'll take time, but it is something that I think will come over time. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree. But I just think there's just a growing acceptance that the outcomes that we desire aren't all about pounds, shilling and pence.
Yeah.
As a society, we are that, in the question, Martin says, as we move to a well-being and green economy, those words would never have been written 10 years ago.
Very true.
And actually, so there is this awareness. And so just almost as the word entrepreneurship is a misnomer, I think, really.
Yeah.
Because it's about the mindset around that. I think that the mindset that it's a misnomer that entrepreneurship equally is about money. I don't think it is. I think it's about many, much wider outcomes than that. And there's a line, isn't there, about if you, I can't remember what it is. Sorry, but if you focus on the money, then the money's not going to come. You need to focus on the passion and the quality of whatever it is that you are doing, and then if it's money that you want, then that will follow. But also, if it's a social good that you want, then that will follow. If you have the passion and drive to make that change that you are looking to make, then actually the desirable outcomes will follow.
So it comes back to caring about what you're doing, have a desire to make a positive impact.
Yeah,
I think we see that with the entrepreneurs coming through our programs now. They all have something bigger than just what they do, as the reason why they're doing it. Because that's the thing, when you're setting up a business, you need something that's going to carry you through on those really, really tough days where your biggest client pulls out at the minute's notice, or a big funding project you were going for didn't come off. I think the investment world is a big part of this as well. I think it's an opportunity or an invitation to investors to state what causes they want to invest in and what they want to be a part of, and being able to find a way to support in that way. And maybe that is part of a wider, conversation around what are the big social challenges of the day. And from where the investment goes, the kind of growth will go. I think there's a bigger question then around, how much that value stays in communities and things. But yeah, it's definitely moved so much in the last decade.
and there's something about the outcomes. We have to be careful about what outcomes we ask for, because then that drives people's behaviours.
Yeah.
So if the outcome is the profit and loss line, that's great. But actually, it might. So within organisations, we can hopefully create environments where people can be inspired by different outcomes. That will then drive up. Drive cultural change within the organisation. So for me, I've just met Gwen today here at Moneypenny, who was one of our was on our We Mind the Gap programme, and for me that's the biggest joy I have had for weeks, was actually seeing Gwen walk in here today with her Moneypenny lanyard around her neck, and so that has inspired me to think, oh my God, that's amazing, and so that drives me on to do more and better. And so that outcome is nothing, that's a social outcome, isn't it? And we need to be aware what drives people's behaviours, and also recruit people within our teams who are inspired by the things we want them to be inspired by, not conventional. I think that there are many outdated models actually that we need to be very aware of.
True. I'll move on to another question, and it's: how have some of our oldest industries in Wales, such as farming and agriculture, adopted an entrepreneurial ethos, and what impact has this made? So, Gareth, can I come to you?
Yeah, I think technology was, as I say, in the last decade or so, technology has been the thing. So it's all been about, Internet of Things and connectivity and data tracking and measurement, things like that. And I think we've seen that, some amazing things around satellite monitoring of farms and things. I think now, again, we're seeing the shift over to kind of green and things like that. So buying locally, sourcing it from farm to plate. So I think this entrepreneurial ethos is, again, spotting a market, and especially in the last with the World Startup Awards, we've seen so many great examples of companies who have spotted that, do you know what, people want fresh, good food from within their community. I did, like, the number of people on our street who signed up to the Milkman after years of not, even thinking about all of this stuff, shifts back over to, again, how much of that money can stay in your community. So I think that's where a lot of industries like agriculture have, seen a massive opportunity, which then is thinking about, okay, well, how do we serve people? How do we make that as good an experience as if you're going into a supermarket, or, like the Gusto boxes. Gusto's amazing, and it tells you about the kind of source and where everything comes from. Absolutely. And it improves you. It's this idea that by being a Gusto customer, I'm improving as a cook. I think it's, farms that recognize if we can make our customers better, they'll want to stay with us. Again, it's an opportunity, right?
Rachel?
Well, I don't know very much about farming and agriculture, but I think there's something about, we have, through this digital age, we have a window on the world, and we can gather best practice from anywhere in the world, can't we? And we can just bring it here and just do it. And I think that I know I'm Coleg Cambria, they're Llysmassi, they're really changing their practices around how they manage the herd there, because they're following models that have been proven elsewhere. And I just think it's and so it's that whole, we need to learn from elsewhere, and take lessons in, and then again be prepared to give it a go, and know that if we don't give it a go, then all those old industries are going to fail. Absolutely. And we have to, but with digitization, with this move to local quality produce, there are amazing opportunities.
Okay, we'll move on to another question. We have a question from Sarah Lois Roberts.
Mae'r meddylfryd bod unrhyw un yn gallu bod yn entrepreneuriaid yn ddiddorol ac yn galonogol iawn, ond sut fedrwn ni gefnogi rheini sydd efo rhwystrau ychwanegol i droi breuddwyd entrepreneuraidd yn reality?
So we just have time for one more question to fit in, and this is from Sarah Lois Roberts, of the Enterprise Hub Manager, and she's Mentormon. How can we support those with additional barriers to turn into their entrepreneurial dreams into reality? Very interesting question. So over to you, Gareth.
Yeah, I think, going back to what we said about social values and things, I think everyone has different barriers, and you don't know what someone's carrying when they walk in a room. So I think this idea that anyone could just quit their job and start a business tomorrow is a complete fallacy.
Absolutely.
I think it's understanding those barriers and putting in place different solutions and systems for different people. Yeah, I think sometimes there's a lot around entrepreneurship that I hate, this idea that anyone can do, or it's not true, but you can be more entrepreneurial. That's the most important thing I think from this paper, is that being an entrepreneur doesn't mean quitting everything and starting tomorrow. It means trying to find work in an environment where your views are valued, where you, and then if you are in the position where you are leading a company or you're leading an organization, creating those values because of the massive value that's created and that's been evidenced in your work in creating the paper. So I think that's what I see as being the opportunity around the barriers is it's not ignoring the barriers, not pretending they don't exist, but trying to find a way to be in the environment where you can be more entrepreneurial.
Do you think a lot of the barriers are about people's maybe self-perception? I'm thinking about my own previous research, which looked at high growth firms, for example, and it was one of the key things to come out of that was the value and importance of confidence and self-belief, and that network of people around you to empower you to go and do something. It's I think often the barriers are about our own perceptions, and we need to be supportive in a wider ecosystem and be connected to people like yourselves to say, do you know what, you can do this, with the right support and the right setup, you can have the power to go and make this happen. What do you think, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I agree absolutely, and I think the ecosystem within which we operates needs to be flexible enough to answer any of those additional, any barriers. And I think it would be tragic if those barriers stop entrepreneurial activity. And so, we inevitably have process to make things happen in an efficient, effective way, but sometimes process needs to be broken. And I think that therefore the people who are responsible for process in whichever organisations, and so much of this paper is about creating change within organisations, but so many organisations are run by pretty, demanding and potentially outdated process now, because the world has changed so much. Absolutely. And actually maybe the last 18 months have provided opportunity for some people who wouldn't have sensed that opportunity previously, because they've been able to work from home, because they've been able to work at times and in ways that suit them. So actually I think our ecosystems, that they need flexibility, and we need to be able to break the process if it means that we can help someone to move towards exploring the problem that they've identified and the solution they can find for that.
Absolutely. Gareth, would you like the final word before I draw the session to a close?
Yeah, I think it's being empathetic. I think it always comes down to understanding what someone's going through that might stop them from, if they can't afford to, or they don't have the networks or the contacts. But if that's the thing, then you find a way to build your network. If you don't have the skills, you find a way to build your skills. And I think sometimes people have had so many knockbacks through losing jobs or seeing people around them struggling financially that they don't feel the confidence to feel like I can just go on LinkedIn and find who I need to speak to and arrange, even something which might come as second nature once you've done it 5, 6, 10 times. It's very hard to do it the first time. I think they call it the doorstep mile, right? It's such a hard thing. It sounds simple, but it's so hard for some people just to get to that first point, to get to that meeting, or if they can even get to that meeting, So I think recognizing and empathizing with people's barriers in different ways, helps us to put out the invitation to be able to say, if you want to have a chat with me, it's not just my door's always open. It's an active invitation to say, come and have a chat with me about this if you've got an interest.
Gosh, in the last hour we've covered so much, haven't we? And the paper has incorporated so many wide areas. I'm conscious that there's a lot to discuss, and it will hopefully stimulated a lot of more debate for a long time to come. I'm conscious that, our time's come to an end, and I'd just like to thank everyone who has been watching and have been taking part in this discussion and has submitted questions. I'd also like to thank everyone who's taken part in putting the paper together. The guests and the panel, you Gareth and you Rachel, and Money Penny for hosting us today. And I'd also like to say a thank you to Callan at Wrexham for the technical IC support as well. Just a final thing to say that you can now access the What If Everyone is an Entrepreneur paper by going onto the BeTheSpark Facebook or Twitter site, or by visiting the BeTheSpark.com website. Diolch yn fawr, thank you very much.